WNST, and I've talked a lot of football, and I'm going to continue to talk football around here. And I know it's a little out of season, but I figure during bye week, this is a great time to really sort of roll our sleeves up, talk about the baseball season. I'm going to have a lot of baseball guests banging in here over the next week and a half, and a lot of the guys I chased down during the World Series. And it's so hard to talk about the World Series in it because I feel like I waste a really good segment with a guy like Justin McGuire after Game 3 or after Game 4 or after Game 5, where I would rather really assess the whole thing in its totality. I think we've done that. Justin McGuire covers all things baseball and has for a long, long time as a former editor of Sporting News. He's out with a baseball book pod on Twitter, and you can follow all things he does, including 2 beers, a ball, and a glove at J McGuire. That's MCGUIRE MLB. He's also contributing at Fansided, and you know, for baseball fans, when the season ends the way it does, there is this little down period, but not for long, man. I mean, this is where teams like the Orioles and the other 30 teams that are feeling bad about themselves about not winning, this is how you get better. This is the part of the year where that happens, and this is the part of the year where the Orioles really aren't very good at this part of it. Right, Justin?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of parts of the year they're not good at these days. That's certainly one of them. Yeah, I mean, that's been a big complaint of a lot of people, I think, in recent years, is that they just, you know, the free agent market, they kind of go for the leftovers, you know. They kind of wait until all the good players have been signed and kind of go for the dregs, and that's how they end up with people like, Valdo Jimenez. I mean, it's also how they ended up with Nelson Cruz, to be fair, but it's not a great strategy. They need pitching desperately, and there's some decent pitchers on the market, and you just sort of know in your heart of hearts that they're not going to go for any of the good pitchers, and they're going to end up with some back end type guys.
What you mean, like Wade Miley and Chris Tillman and offering them? You know, when I hear at the end of the year, and Luke and I argued about this in August and September, kind of as the thing petered out, and I'll argue this with anyone. If at the end of a season where guys have ERAs of 6s, 7s, and 8s, and they're your first call instead of your last call, I really question the integrity of what you're trying to do and talking about improving, because I don't need to see those guys pitch for us ever again. And if Chris Tillman goes somewhere and pitches to a 4.2 ERA in Pittsburgh or Chicago or Bemidji, God bless him, but I wouldn't be the guy signing back up for that after what we've seen around here last year, which was, quite frankly, it was an embarrassment. The pitching for the Orioles was an embarrassment if they were really trying to win a World Series this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Tillman-Miley thing was hilarious to see the response to that on social media among Orioles fans. It's like, come on, this is what we're doing after last year. We're bringing these guys back. I mean, part of it you got to imagine is simply a feeling that, you know, with Jimenez, as we mentioned, he's also, you know, a free agent. He's gone. Those two are free agents. There may be a feeling on the part of the Orioles brass that they simply need to have bodies, you know, that like we need to at least talk to these guys because we need to have pitchers to fill out a rotation. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me to bring either of those guys back. I think you'd be better off, you know, bringing up some of the guys from AAA and taking your chances on them. At least you're not going to have to pay them a lot. And yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. If it all comes down to what they're trying to accomplish in 2018, and if you're trying to win in 2018, there's no reason to bring Tillman and Miley back.
Don't you have to go one way or another here, right? I mean, and again, yeah. This is Angelos, right? I mean, this is all on this creepy old 90-year-old man who has never, ever done anything sort of with the swing of other people or with the swing of the league. And you got Buck dangling. You got Duquette dangling. Duquette's allegedly the guy that's making these decisions here as a lame duck guy that's not going to be here to bear any of the fruit when all of it's done. And then you've got Machado, Jones, Brock, Britton. You got to figure out whether you're going to sign Scope or not. I mean, this is an off-season of incredibly heavy lifting for this organization that is bereft of minor league talent, has no farm system to speak of at all, that couldn't have dealt into any sort of situation to bring in a Verlander or to bring in a Yu Darvish or any of the impact players that we saw back at the trading deadline. But the Machado thing, I would say that's priority one, but priority one's going to be who's going to run this franchise. Duquette, who's going to make these decisions? Who's going to be around after the nuclear bomb goes off 18 months from now? Not even 18 months from now. I mean, we're looking at 11 months from now, but 18 months from now when they suit up on opening day and say who's going to be on this team 18 months from now.
Yeah, it's like you said, you kind of have to go one direction or another, and then either you decide we're going to roll the dice and make 2018 a year, and if we go for it, we got one last year of Machado, we got one last year of Buck, and we just go for it. And if you're going to go for it, then you spend heavily in the free agent market. You bring in as many good pitchers as you can and other position players, or you blow it up. And I think that's what I've been advocating for a couple of years now. I think this team is not built for long-term success, and even next year, it's just hard to see this team, beating the Red Sox and Yankees next year. I just don't see how that's going to happen. I mean, the Yankees are in a position, as we know, we heard this throughout the postseason, but the Yankees are in a position to be really, really good for a long time. The Red Sox aren't too far behind them. I mean, and so the idea that the Orioles are going to be able to compete for the division title in 2018 seems off to me. I don't see it happening. But that seems to be the direction they're heading in, is to say, well, we're going to take one last chance with this group. And again, if you're going to do that, though, you can't have Wade Miley and Chris Tillman be your free agent signings. You have to, just like I said, you have to go for it, and you have to be a player for Darvish, and you have to look at the Alex Cobbs of the world, and maybe look at CeCe Sabathia and some of these other guys. Get a real pitching staff out there, and then maybe you can compete. But as it is right now, there's just no way with what they have.
I think it became clear to everyone, right, as the playoffs roll on and you see Cleveland getting knocked out, you see the Red Sox, the Nationals, these teams that were, I don't want to call them juggernauts, but they would have kicked our ass 3 ways from Sunday if we would have played them often enough, right? I mean, these were the best teams. These were 90-plus win teams. They were consistent most of the year. Cleveland notwithstanding, it came on a little later, and the Nationals having their problems with no competition. But then you got into the real nitty-gritty of the ALCS, NLCS, and then the World Series, and it became very apparent to anyone with any sense who watches baseball that the Orioles are not close to being the Houston Astros or the New York Yankees or the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Cubs or any of these teams right now.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, I think about that. Just even go back to the wild card game, when when the Yankees played the Twins. I mean, the Twins had a significantly better record than the Orioles, and they got their ass kicked by the Yankees. I mean, the Orioles would have been embarrassed in that game, that wild card game, and that was kind of the thing they were playing for a lot of the year, to try to get that second wild card. So, this is a team that is simply not. They're not there. They're not with the other teams, and to me, the Astros. And I think you want to get into the World Series a little bit. If you look at the Astros and how they did it, that provides to me the model for the Orioles. Is just, they're a team who was a joke for several years, but what they did is they allowed themselves, they purposefully bottomed out, right? They had 3 straight losses, 3 seasons in which they had the worst record in baseball. Became the first team to ever have the number 1 overall pick in draft 3 years in a row. And they were a joke. They couldn't, their attendance, their TV ratings, everything was terrible. But it was all for a purpose, right? It was all for building up the farm system, for getting money, and then got themselves in a position where they wanted to get pitching. They can go out and get a Verlander because they have the farm system, they have the payroll flexibility and that sort of thing. They don't have long-term contracts tied up in Chris Davis and Mark Trumbo, So that to me is the model for the Orioles: is to let yourself bottom out, build up the farm system, and then start competing. Because, the Astros are not a huge market team, and they just, they beat the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Dodgers. They beat the 3 biggest payrolls in baseball, and they did it by being smart and building to the farm system and then adding as needed. And that's the one thing the Orioles have not done consistently for 40 years is have a farm system that lets them do things. And nothing is ever going to change until they make that realization and start building the farm system up back again. That needs to be their top priority, I think.
Well, you mentioned the wasted money on Davis and the sunk money on Trumbo and the previously sunk money on Ubaldo Jimenez. And then you look at Machado and say, all right, if he's going to be a Yankee, if he's going to be a Red Sox, you've got to be the team that gets the Chris Sale thing going and getting 2 or 3 prospects for him. This would be the offseason to do that. I can't imagine that the old man's going to authorize anything. He never has, right? I mean, this is an organization that maybe going back to Eddie Murray and maybe the aforementioned Glenn Davis instead of Chris Davis, where that kind of trade happens in this organization where they preemptively say, you know what? Adam Jones will get us a prospect and another guy. Let's go deal him. Manny Machado is going to get us 3 prospects. Let's go do that. Jonathan Scope, here's $120 million. Do you want it? No. Okay, well, we'll come back and play with you, and when you're hitting 30 home runs, we'll deal you during the break and try to get 3 more prospects, because that's the way this is played at this point. It's not played by giving Chris Davis $150 million the way they did 2 years ago, and that was clearly not the idea of Buck Showalter or Dan Duquette. That fell on the old man's desk, and that's really the problem with the organization, is that it historically is not very well run, and we're now getting to the point where it not being well run has cost them a little bit the last year or two after being deodorized for a period of time by Wieters, Markakis, Machado, Scope, some good pitching in the case of Wei and Chen, and some good decisions, and certainly some good trades that Andy McPhail made to bring Adam Jones and Chris Stillman and those guys over here to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The long-term, the Orioles under Angelos have generally not been well run. I would certainly agree with that. And they had this little window the last few years that things went fairly well for them, and they had a little bit of success. But
which is the only time, by the way, in his ownership. I mean, he inherited that thing back in '96 and '97. But since then, in 20 years, they've had 2 or 3 years of prosperity that were really based on Andy, I think. Andy and Buck being geniuses, right? Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of it. And also, just sort of luck of timing that getting Machado and Jones, these guys having good years at the same time the Yankees were down, right? The Yankees and Red Sox kind of had a little down period. I mean, relatively, the Red Sox were pretty bad for a few years there, but the Yankees were, relatively bad. They're not bad, but by Yankee standards, they weren't a juggernaut, and they weren't winning, 97 games every year. And the Orioles took some advantage of that, to make the playoffs a few times. But those days are over. As I said, the Yankees are going to be good for a really long time. And it's frustrating as a fan because, you look at it, they didn't really suffer that much. They didn't have to have those 100-loss seasons the Astros did to get to this point. I mean, some of it was just smart drafting of guys like Aaron Judge, and but they played it smart, and they rebuilt their farm system, and they got some good players coming up. And this is not a team built on free agency. It's a team right now built mainly through the farm system, but they also, they're the Yankees, so they have the money to supplement all this with free agency. And that's what's going to make it so tough to compete with them, is that they got this great core, and they have the financial flexibility to keep adding to it.
Justin McGuire is one of our defending champions and a lifer Baltimore Orioles fan stuck somewhere near Asheville, North Carolina, which means he gets fresh air and tasty, tasty beer to go along with all the hippie culture going on there in western North Carolina. I was in Central Tennessee this week watching the Ravens and the Titans do their thing. We're into bye week, talking some baseball here. He is Jay McGuire, MLB, out on Twitter. And this portion of our WNST programming brought to you by Al's Seafood in Essex. I've been getting crabs and crab cakes there since the 1970s. Al is a bone marrow transplant survivor, and an early one, so give him a high five when you see him over there, as well as Chad the Crab Man. The oldest crab house in Baltimore is still in Essex. It's still at Stemmers Run and Eastern Avenue at the foot of 702, and they're always there with a smile for you. Take home some steamed shrimp. I miss taking those home to my mom. They put the onions on there and the beer and all that good stuff. Al Seafood in Essex. Appreciate their sponsorship, as well as Compass Point Golf Course in Pasadena, the best place to play golf this fall and this winter. Events, friendly folks, and a great course close to home. When the weather is good, get on down to compasspointgolf.com and get a little weekend duffing in there. We're going to be hearing from our pal Robert Kennedy, who runs Compass Point's events program down there, as well as a lot of college basketball and local college basketball. And a shout out to Juan Dixon and our friends over at Coppin State. You're going to hear the Lady Eagles and men's Eagles games here this winter. Fang Mitchell would be very proud. CoppinStateSports.com. They are our partner partner here at WNST. Back to Justin McGuire, MLB. He is the baseball book pod editor as well, and interviewing many baseball book writers in the offseason as the holidays come here. And, I guess for the rest of the league and for free agency, it's a chance for every Oriole fan, every Royals fan, every fan that's close or not close to lament what's going on. Boy, there are a lot of teams in the National League a long way away, and a lot of teams very close, including the Nationals, the Yankees, and the Red Sox. This whole purge of managers here in the month of October was kind of incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was pretty stunned, particularly with Dusty Baker getting fired by the Nationals. People have criticisms of Dusty, but the guy has basically done nothing but win most of his career. And I don't know what the Nationals are expecting. I mean, I'm glad that Dave Martinez is getting a chance. He seems to be a guy who has potential to be a good manager, and he's been on that list of potential managers for a long time. And I'm glad he's getting an opportunity. But I don't know how they expect a first-year manager to win the World Series, which is basically what they've made their priority here, right? That World Series or bust. And I think that's kind of I don't know. That's a lot of pressure on a guy who's never managed before. So yeah, I was pretty. I mean, Farrell didn't surprise me too much, but I say Girardi and Baker, I was surprised by both of those.
Well, and the Girardi thing, the power struggle there, and the fact that dude doesn't have a job, I do. Farrell, I don't think anybody was shocked by, right? I mean, like they've had their go round, and it felt all the while like they wanted to fire him, right? Literally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he would have honestly been gone a few years ago had he not been for the cancer, which they made. Which I mean, I hate to say this. I don't mean to be, blasé about this, but I think when he went through that, they were in a position where they just couldn't really, from a public relations standpoint, couldn't get rid of him, and so they've probably been waiting for an opportunity. And then he wins 2 straight division titles, which makes it tough. This year, they lose that first series, and it's suddenly like, well, this is the opportunity to do it. I don't think they were real happy with him for a while.
Jay McGuire, MLB is the way to follow Justin McGuire out at Sporting News and Baseball Book Pod as well. I guess last thing for you here as we go into the offseason, what do you expect to be realistic for the Orioles, Justin? I mean, I don't know that they're going to, go out and find Jake Arrieta again, or that they're going to spend $100 million on a pitcher. I would think my reasonable expectation, and going back to your Astros thoughts and maybe even the Yankees thoughts a year and a half ago, is if I own the team tomorrow, I would come to Machado and say, here's the $220 million or whatever that number is. Do you want it or not? Not. We're going to go out and make our best deal. Scope, do you want it or not? No, we're going to go make our best deal. But that's fantasy land for me, because the most important thing they can figure out is really who's going to be the guy making that decision. And the last time they went out to hire a general manager, they couldn't find anybody to take the job. So I don't know that I want any big decisions being made if I'm in a vacuum as a fan without knowing who's the guy making those decisions. And I think that's the most awkward thing, because the fans are going to focus on the pitchers. The fans are going to focus on free agents that aren't going to come here anyway. The fans are going to focus on Machado, and I do agree that that's important. But I still think who's going to run the place has to be the first thing for me as an Oriole fan.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly true. And I sort of agree with you that I think we're not going to have a definitive answer to that. I suspect what's going to happen is, the year's going to play out, and then the Duquette and Buck are probably just going to walk, and we're going to sort of be in a position next year where everybody's gone and they're kind of scrambling, because this team doesn't do long-term planning well. I think that's an understatement. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they kind of need to say right now, are we, is this Buck? I mean, is this Duquette's last year, or are we going to try to bring him back? And if we're going to try to bring him back, do it now. Do it before the season starts. Get him into some sort of a long-term deal, and don't just let it be a thing that hangs around you all season. But I think it's going to be a thing that hangs around them all season. That just seems to be the way they do things.
was fun watching Houston win, wasn't it? I mean, we haven't talked about the actual games of the World Series, but it was a hell of a World Series. I mean, all the way around. I don't know as a baseball fan. I mean, it was a little weird, two National League teams playing, right? But, I think once you get past that, I don't think anybody could feel bad about any part of that World Series. It had been a long time for the Dodgers. They had spent a lot of money. There was a lot of passion from the fan bases. I think there were a lot of likable sort of, players and villains, if you feel that way about Puig or whatever. But Verlander, there was a story behind every, including Vin Scully and Sandy Koufax and all the legends out, and I just really enjoyed the World Series this year.
Yeah, I did too, and it's funny you mentioned the two National League team things because I think both of us are old enough that that's it's always going to seem a little weird to have the Astros in the National League. I mean in the American League, I'm still not quite used to the Brewers in the National League, and that's been going on a lot longer. So yeah, it's like. To me, it seemed like an NL West division series or something. But yeah, it was a great World Series. It was like the first time since 1970 that two teams with 100-plus wins had played. So it was high-quality teams. You said there were great storylines with Kershaw and Verlander and Jose Altuve, and everybody loves that guy, right? I mean, how could you not like him? And it was a lot of fun games. I mean, some of those games were just wild. The one was a Game 5, I think. The one
all
that ended up being 13-12.
All night.
I know. I stayed up for that whole thing, and I kind of regretted it the next day. But it was a heck of a lot of fun. And I don't see how anybody can watch this World Series and say that baseball is not in a good place in terms of the quality of play on the field.
Sure.
Now is it? It's made. I don't know how good a place it is in terms of the people who are running the game and that sort of thing, but the quality of play is probably as high as it's ever been.
But too much strikeout, too much home run, too much, not enough ball in play. I'll hear all of that over the course of a season. I don't think that was a problem in the postseason when good teams got together. But when you're watching Mark Trumbo and Chris Davis and the Orioles combined for another 15, 17 strikeout night, that's not good optics. It's almost, and I say this to Luke, it's almost like watching tennis when the rackets were too strong and the men were too strong and everything's an ace. When everything's an ace, you don't have a sport anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that to an extent. I think that's a long-term thing baseball needs to figure out is, I think as analytics have taken over the game, there has been more of an emphasis on homers and then on walks and that sort of thing. And of course, with homers and walks come more strikeouts. So it ends up becoming the three true outcomes kind of game where that's a lot of what we're seeing. And I think long term, I'd like to see the balance go back to, like you said, more balls in play. I'd love to see more, base stealing, fat guys who don't necessarily hit a lot of homers, but get on base and steal bases. I would hope that somehow baseball can figure out a way to shift the scales back in that direction, at least somewhat. But that's going to be a long-term thing.
That'll be for the analytics nerds, I'm sure. Jay McGuire, MLB is the way to find Justin McGuire. He is an Oriole fan, longtime editor with Sporting News, now hosting and contributing at Fansided. You can find him at Jay McGuire MLB, as well as Baseball Book Pod. You're doing a little bit of baseball Christmas stuff here, holiday stuff, right? I mean, a lot of books being sold and a lot of authors out writing books and being interviewed right now.
Yeah, I've got Ned Colletti coming up soon, the former GM of the Dodgers. He's got a new book out. And yeah, it's I think baseball books tend to be released mainly in towards the beginning of the season and then towards Father's Day. That's really when you see a ton of them. Those seem to be the two. But yeah, certainly we're going to see some this fall as Christmas comes up. The thing I tell people is there's never going to be a shortage of baseball books when you talk about. I'm never going to run out of subject matter. Because people I know who aren't necessarily baseball fans, they'll say, well, how do you find enough people? I'm like, I've literally got people coming to me, I can't keep up with the requests that I'm getting because there's just so many books that come out and there's so many older books. And I could do this every day of the year for 5 years and not run out of books. That's not going to be an issue.
Well, if you need me, it's sort of like Elvis Costello. Every day, I write the book of Peter Angelo. So, the people say, when are the Peter Principles going to be done? I'm like, it's still in progress. I mean, the movie ain't over. I still got popcorn here, and I'm hanging out, waiting for another parade. And now Houston's had a parade. So we will be following you during the offseason out on the web, as well as your baseball book pods. Always great to talk baseball with you, Jay. Thanks for making some time for us, man.
No problem. Anytime you want me on, just let me know.
Justin McGuire, our dear friend, Jay McGuire, MLB, the way to find him. He's in Asheville, North Carolina. He's probably drinking better beer than you or I are. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. With the holidays coming up, you got to get out and give the king a ring. Lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. You know where to go. Get the Rosedale and give the king a ring and ask him when he's going to have me in another funny commercial, because I like getting dressed up and acting the fool out there as well. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need Fremont Mortgage and their education online. If you're buying, selling, or just in the market to maybe refinance your home, Fremont Mortgage has it all for you at Fremont.com. And, of course, Carl Delmont will be here a little later on in the week talking some Harrisburg Heat and get you ready for soccer season around here with the Blast as well. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there. Our morning newspaper comes to your email inbox each and every morning digitally at 7 a.m. That is all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And last but never least, any breaking news, any big things that happen here during Ravens bye week, you're going to get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford at Security Boulevard, and Dennis is going to be here hosting some radio from 3 until 5. He does that every Thursday. Driving you home, it is the SSV on WNST with Dennis Colatzos as well. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are also doing a live event next Tuesday night with CJ Mosley. Go to our Facebook and Twitter. Learn a little bit more about that. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and hopefully having a few bye-week beverages as we prepare for Green Bay. I am headed to Lambeau Field. Hopefully it's not any frozen tundra next weekend. Hopefully it's 62 and balmy. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.